fun one. It happens to be while picking up kids from the school. It's the way that it goes, but Chiefs have announced they have elevated former quarterbacks coach, former Bears head coach, former offensive coordinator, passing game coordinator Matt Nagy, who's been on staff, to their new offensive coordinator spot. We knew this was going to come. We talked about this last week as really the heir apparent of what the Chiefs were going to want to do once Eric Bieniemy had gotten the job in Washington. So not much of a surprise. Now, I don't have details right now about whether it was something that he interviewed for against other interviewers, if this was something that they held a couple interviews in private and just made the decision. We'll probably get some details about that as it comes out. Right now, not much of that. So what does this mean? Well, again, it's not much of a surprise. It is really just kind of the operating procedures that as we expected. Let me know in the chat what you guys think, because I think that this is a positive sign moving forward. I think that it is really what they needed to get done. And I think that it gives Patrick the ability to just move forward with concepts he's already drawn up, play procedures that they've already drawn up, and understanding that the continuity is really what drives keeping the offense the same. Now, obviously, there's going to be continuity with Andy Reid whenever that happens. But with having Nagy as well, it lets you just kind of get on back down the road. Now, Joseph, you have a great question. Who's going to be the quarterback coach? And I think you hit it on the head because there is a lot of question around that. Now, I would have told you, and I did tell you a couple of weeks ago, that I thought Greg Lewis should have been in line for that job. Greg Lewis went and interviewed for a similar job out with the Commanders now. So I think there's an opportunity here to maybe spice the pot a little bit. Joe Blameyer's been in there, and Girardi's been a guy that they've talked about the last week or so. I didn't think he was really ready to jump to that point, and I thought Joe Blameyer, after all the film work that Andy Reid has really touted him for over the last few years, I thought Blameyer would probably be right in line, maybe even ahead of Greg Lewis had he stayed. So I like that idea as well, Daryl. Sorry, the glasses are in my way here a little bit. I'd love to see Alex Smith get on a coaching staff. I don't think it would be directly as the quarterback coach. I think he would be an assistant quarterback coach at first. And I still love the idea, especially as you guys are mentioning, it's not just the in-house candidates. Pep Hamilton is an option there. And I love that because that's what I meant by you can add a little spice to the pot. It's one thing to carry everything over and just business as usual, right? That can work, especially given that, you've won a couple of Super Bowls with this offense and with this staff, and with Nagy being involved early and now late again. But to add Pep Hamilton, I think that's a really intriguing way to get an outside perspective, some new thoughts. As much as this team thrives on groupthink, everybody coming up with ideas, whether it's Patrick on the practice field or Kels during training camp coming up with wild ideas. We saw the circle of death, they call it, the ring around the rosies. Like, that was a player thought up thing as well. So Reid is unique in allowing everybody to have input. And I think that's, as I get a call here, I think that's really important because it lets you be less and less predictable because you never know where these ideas are coming from. I think Pep Hamilton actually accentuates that because he's had a lot of success elsewhere. Clearly, I would say the highlight for me in looking at his resume is what he was able to do with Justin Herbert as a rookie. I think it all comes back to that. I think if Justin Herbert had his way, he'd have him back, to tell you the truth. And I like that concept because it's a fresh look at a guy that doesn't need you to teach him the fundamentals. He needs you to think outside the box and help him exploit whatever the next wrinkle is that gets thrown at Patrick. I think that's going to be really important. So what I would personally like to see is that Pep Hamilton does come in and that you get a couple of guys around what's going on, maybe make Joe Blamer the passing game coordinator. Everyone wants a little title bump, but I would like to see eventually Alex Smith get in a coaching room. From what I understand, he's not interested at this point. From what I understand, he's entertained the idea, but he's not ready for that. I don't know if it's the age of his kids or if it's just still the daily grind that he goes through to recover from his significant injury. I think maybe he just wants to save that for down the line a little bit, enjoy this part of his life until he's a little bit older, a little bit bored, to tell you the truth. That does happen with a lot of players and coaches. So while I would like to see that, I think it's kind of a stretch right now. So I could see somebody moving up to pass game coordinator. Maybe Girardi becomes run game coordinator. They certainly need to have that. There's now a gap at running back coach as well. So you could see somebody shifting that direction. But I like the concept of adding Pep Hamilton. I think that overall, that strengthens the variability and the ingenuity that comes into not only designing a game plan, but designing an offense for an entire year. We've seen Patrick have to evolve year after year after year. And what's going to get thrown at him next? What's he going to work on next? It was footwork before he was a starter. It was everything else in terms of like the too deep in the last 2 seasons, right? Where he's had to like really deal with over the top defenses. What are they going to try to do now? Because they went away from that. And like I said, the teams that were successful in slowing down the Chiefs were playing that too high, playing some 4, playing some 6 in the back shell coverages, not because of Tyreek, but because of Patrick. And he's learned to adapt to that. He's gone to the short game. What are they going to throw at him next? That's going to be the big question. I think it's going to be really the zone blitz type thing as particularly linebacker levels, but secondaries in general in the NFL get more athletic. I think people will go back to that well, and that will be the solution where they see a lot of mixed zone blitz come at them in the next year or 2. I think that's key. And I think adapting to that takes not only Andy Reid and not only Patrick Mahomes and not only Matt Nagy. I think Pat Hamilton is another guy that could be like right up there in the thick of things as much as what Nagy's been currently. And somebody really wants to get a hold of me. I'm sorry for the interruptions. As I said, I'm about to pick up the kids here, so we'll wrap it in a second. But I see a lot of you guys are positive in the chat. I think that's great. I'm pretty positive overall about what this means for where they're going. A little bit of diversity. I hope a little bit more vertical game that isn't reliant on the super long developing passes. I think that means more stack concepts, more things that draw rolled coverage to them. So I think Nagy has a great perspective on that. I think he's super creative, much like Andy Reid is. I do think that they have to double down on making sure that they keep the run game alive. I thought what we saw in the Super Bowl, getting to that balance point, was really significant, to tell you the truth. And I do think that that's got to be an element going forward. And as I understand it, working for Anthony Lynn, I think Pep Hamilton back then was pretty good at that. So I love the idea. Little fresh blood from outside the tree to bring in under the branches of the Andy Reid tree. I think that helps the Chiefs overall. I think it also helps that as we see Kels age a little bit, I think they have to be more attentive to what they do with not only the tight end spot, but the big slot role. So I think that that's really the way that it's got to go. Now, Vic Fangio, I see some in the comments, he's already got a job. He's out of here. In fact, he had to sign a 2-week contract just to hang out with the Eagles to try to give them a boost before he goes to, I think it's Miami. That said, Spags isn't going anywhere. A Super Bowl year, he's not going to get fired. I know everybody's frustrated. Quite frankly, I was frustrated a lot of the season as well. But you saw a lot of the things that I was banging on all year long came around in the playoffs, came around certainly in the Super Bowl. And they were able to take away the run. They were able to do those things. Everybody wants to complain about the grass and how they couldn't get a pass rush. Well, the Chiefs' defensive front was able to take away the run. And sometimes anchoring on a wet field is just as hard as getting takeoff. So I'm not going to buy it. I refuse to say that it's only the Eagles that were hurt by that surface. So that said, I do think Spags is here another season. I think eventually what's going to happen is Spags will decide to retire. I don't know when that will be. I think Joe Cullen is the heir apparent in waiting for the defensive coordinator job. Now, if somebody plucks him beforehand, then we got to start over. But I think that's kind of where it's leaning right now. So what will happen next? Hopefully we find out about the hire for the quarterback position, whether it's an internal promotion. Maybe Pep just comes in as a as an outside consultant, a passing game analyst, like they used to call Chili. There's a number of options, but I do think it's going to be more based on how to fit all the pieces of the puzzle together. And clearly, I think everybody wants to complain about what Nagy did in Chicago. This is going to be a step closer for him, looking like a guy who can be a head coach again. Whether that's in Kansas City and he decides to recover or retire, or whether he recovers his reputation enough to get offers again, we'll find out. I'm really interested to see what the spark becomes, and we probably won't know until the regular season next year, but we might see it a little bit in OTAs. And I think if there's something drastic in terms of like what their future plans are, we're going to see it in free agency. I don't know if it's going to show up as much in the draft. I think the draft is going to be about building fundamental building block type players. But I think free agency might be something that we get a little bit of an inkling in. So let's see what happens next. I'll try to go live whenever another hire happens. Seth's coming up this afternoon on a special Friday edition of Chief in the North. And we're going to keep rolling with the content. I appreciate your guys' time. I got to go pick up the kids. So you all have a good one, and I'm going to get out of here. See you next time.